All right, today we are going to read chapter 9 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. This is not just going to be a reading where I read every single word. I will read every single word, but I'm going to stop and explain things and talk about different interesting vocabulary words or phrases that we might find useful. So even if you are very advanced with your English, this will be hard to understand. And for that reason, we have to stop and we have to talk about many of the sentences, most of the sentences probably. So it will take a long time to get through the chapter, but in the end, maybe we'll have a better understanding of more complicated sentences and more complicated English. So this is really kind of an exploration of chapter 9, more than it is a reading of chapter 9. All right, now if you are watching this live with me, then I encourage you to ask questions if you have questions. If I didn't explain something and you want to know something, then just ask a question in the comments. Well, speaking of comments, where's my comments window here? Oh, if I see it, because I don't even know where my comments window is. Where did it go? Oh, there's always something going wrong. Okay, well, oh, here we go. Okay, I found it. It's up. All right. So let's start reading chapter 9 of David Copperfield. I have a memorable birthday. So in chapter 8, Davy spent some time, some of the holiday time, at his home. And it was very uncomfortable. It was very bad because his stepfather was there with his evil sister. And they're very mean. They're very mean to Davy. They're very mean to his mother. It was an extremely unpleasant experience. And now, at the end of chapter 8, he was getting into the cart, and the man was taking him back to school. So now he's back at school. And chapter 9 is entitled, I Have a Memorable Birthday. I pass over all that happened at school until the anniversary of my birthday came around in March. Except that Steerforth is his best friend at school, was more to be admired than ever. And Steerforth is much older than Davy, so Davy admires him. He looks up to him. I remember nothing. He was going away at the end of the half year, if not sooner, and was more spirited and independent than before in my eyes, and therefore more engaging than before. Wow, it sounds like his friend Steerforth is leaving the school. Now Davy says that he's engaging, or he's more engaging than before. And that is really actually a very good word to know. So let's put that up here as one of the words that later we're going to practice. Engage. So let's add this up here. Engaging. This word engage, most of the time it's used to mean connect. So a lot of the times when you see the word engage, it could even be when you're talking about electricity or something, it means connecting. Two things are connecting. But when you talk about engaging, when you're talking about a person, the type of connecting that they're doing is they're very good at speaking, or they have a very nice personality, or they want to interact with you. They have an interest in building a relationship with you. This is what engaging means here. So Steerforth, it seems, will be leaving school soon. And for this reason, he seems much more engaging now. Maybe he understands he's leaving school soon and he's going to miss his friends. So he's trying to connect with them more than before because he's going to miss them when he's gone. So he was going away at the end of the half year, if not sooner, and was more spirited, meaning he was happier, or he was more animated, had more energy, and independent than before in my eyes, and therefore more engaging than before. He was connecting with us more, he was interacting with us more. But beyond this, I remember nothing. The great remembrance by which that time is marked in my mind seems to have swallowed up all lesser recollections and to exist alone. Okay, so the great remembrance, now it seems like, I'm not sure yet because I have to read this, but it seems like he's saying there was one thing that happened which makes it difficult for me to remember anything else because it was so big. This really big thing happened, and I don't remember little details because of this big event. Let's see what that thing is. It's even difficult for me to believe that there was a gap of full 2 months between my return to Salem House, that's the name of the school where he's staying, and the arrival of that birthday. So something big happened on this birthday at Salem House. I can only understand the fact was so, because I know it must have been so. Otherwise, I should feel convinced that there was no interval, and that the one occasion trod upon the other's heels. Okay, so let's see. It's difficult for me to believe that there was a gap of full 2 months. So he went home for the holiday vacation, probably returning in the middle of January. I don't think they mentioned when he returned, but if it's the holiday vacation, it was probably the middle of January. And then his birthday was in March. And he doesn't even believe that there was a space between that. That's what he's saying, because he says, I can't believe there was a gap of 2 months between when I returned to school and my birthday in March. It seemed like he returned to school and then whammo, there's his birthday. Okay, that's what he's saying here. I can only understand the fact was so because I know it must have been so. He's saying, well, obviously there were 2 months in between because my birthday's in March and I returned to school in January. How well I recollect the kind of day it was. I smell the fog that hung about the place. I see the horror frost. You know, I've seen that word horror before. Okay, there's a bad word, which is W-H-O-R-E. Don't say that word. But it sounds just like this word, which is H-O-A-R. And I've seen that word before, but I don't remember what it means. Let's look up this word horror, H-O-A-R, which is different from a very bad word. Oh, well, actually, it's an archaic word, which means that it isn't used anymore. And it's used to talk about things that are grayish white. So kind of gray, kind of white, something like that. So, but it's not an important word to know because people don't use it anymore. It's archaic, which means people don't use it anymore. I don't remember where I saw that before, but I've seen that word before, horror, H-O-A-R, which is different from W-H-O-R-E. So I see the hoar frost, ghostly through it. I feel my rimy hair fall clammy on my cheek. Now, clammy, actually, I'm not sure what rimy means. I've never seen that before. I think that's another archaic word, but let's take a look at it and see what that means, rimy. So you see, I get to even improve my vocabulary here. Rimy, R-I-M-Y. I have never seen that before, rimy. Let's take a look. What does rimy mean? Rimy means covered with frost. So that's frost is kind of like ice. Let me show you what frost is in case you don't know what that is. Frost. Let's see. So this is frost. It's kind of like the ice that covers things, especially in the morning time when it's cold outside. So I guess the correct adjective for that is rimy. So the leaves are rimy with frost. I would never say that. I've never heard that word before in my life. Rimy. Okay, let's see. How well I remember the kind of day it was. The smell hung. I smell the fog that hung about the place. I see the hoar frost, so the whitish gray frost, ghostly through it. I feel my rimy hair fall clammy on my cheek. So his hair is rimy. He's got frost in his hair because he's so cold. Now, this word clammy, I'm actually going to put this up as a vocabulary word that we can use later, that we can practice later. Clammy. Clammy is a feeling that you have. It's kind of like a cold, wet feeling. When something is clammy, it's cold and wet. It's not a nice feeling. It's an ugly feeling. If you get sick, if you have a cold, and you feel the chills, you feel cold because you're sick. Usually, you're sweaty, but you're cold at the same time, and that is what clammy means. It's like wet and cold. I feel my rimy hair, so I have frost in my hair, fall clammy on my cheek. So the wet, frosty hair creates a cold, wet feeling on his cheek, which is not nice. That's not a nice feeling. I took along the dim perspective of the schoolroom. Now, we've talked about that word dim before, which means not very much light. So I think that he's describing that he's in the schoolroom and there's a little light. He can see a little bit, but not very much. The room is dim. With a sputtering candle. Sputter is when something is losing energy. So if a machine sputters, like a car sputters, an old car, you might hear as it's stopping. That's sputtering. So a sputtering candle is a candle that maybe it's very low and it's about to die. So it's like a loss of energy, a sputtering candle. I look along the dim perspective of the schoolroom with a sputtering candle here and there to light up the foggy morning. And the breath of the boys wreathing and smoking in the raw cold as they blow upon their fingers. So they're very cold and they're blowing on their fingers, but then you can see their breath because it's so cold. And tap their feet upon the floor. It was after breakfast, and we had been summoned to the in from the playground when Mr. Sharp entered and said, okay, but so to be summoned means to be called. When they say, come here, it's kind of an official, come here. Actually, let's put that word summon up here. That's a good word to know, summon. So we'll practice this word later. So we were being summoned because summon means come here, in an official way. So the teacher was saying, come on, come into the class. We were being summoned. David Copperfield is to go into the parlor. I expected a hamper from Peggotty. Okay, now this story I think was written about 180 years ago. So, the language changes a little bit. In modern times, and maybe even during this time, I'll show you what I understand a hamper to be. So it's something we still use, actually. Whoops. So a hamper is where you put your dirty clothes, your dirty laundry. So you see it's like a basket. And so you can still use that word to describe this object, a hamper. But in the story, he says, I was expecting a hamper from Peggotty. Remember, Peggotty is the servant at his mother's house, but she's like his grandmother or his aunt, his old aunt or something. They have a very close relationship. So what I think they mean by hamper here is like a basket full of good things like bread or treats or something like that. I expected a hamper from Peggotty and brightened at the order. So the teacher says, Copperfield, go into the parlor. And Davy's very happy. Oh, wow, we're a hamper from Peggotty. I'm going to get treats and food. So he was very happy when they told him to go into the parlor. Some of the boys about me put in their claim not to be forgotten in the distribution of good things as I got out of my seat with great alacrity. Okay, so claim means this is mine. We've used claim before in a different way, but here claim means this is mine, that's mine. So all the boys also thought, oh, Davy's getting a care package, a box full of treats, a box full of nice things. And so they're saying, I get the cake, I get the cheese. So they're already claiming what is theirs from his gift. Now we've got this word alacrity. Now I've seen that word used before. I've never really used that word, but so it's not a terribly common word, but I know that people use it. Let's just define it. Alacrity. Brisk, cheerful readiness. So let's see. As I got out of my seat with great alacrity, I was very ready and happy to get out of my seat and go to the parlor. Don't hurry, David, said Mr. Sharp. There's time enough, my boy. Don't hurry. I might have been surprised by the feeling tone in which he spoke. So the teacher is saying, don't hurry, but he's saying it in a way that sounds like he cares. Like there's something about his tone that is making Davy think, why is he talking to me in such a nice way? Usually he's not very nice to me. So he says, I might have been surprised by the feeling tone in which he spoke if I had given it a thought. But I gave it none until afterwards. So he said it in a very sympathetic way. Don't hurry. Which at the time Davy didn't think about it. You know, why is he being nice to me? He didn't think about it. But later he thought about it and said, oh, because he knew what was waiting in the parlor. So we don't have a box of treats waiting in the parlor. That's for sure. And there I found Mr. Creakle. Mr. Creakle is the mean old owner of the school. And if this is your first time watching this, that's who Mr. Creakle is. And he's not a nice man. He's a horrible man. And he's the owner of the school. There I found Mr. Creakle sitting at his breakfast with a cane. So the cane, that's what he uses to beat the children with. And a newspaper before him. So he was reading the newspaper and he had his cane ready. And Mr. Creakle with an opened letter, and Mrs. Creakle with an opened letter in her hand, but no hamper. So, where are the treats? Where's my box full of treats from home? No hamper. But Mrs. Creakle had a letter. She was looking at a letter, an opened letter. David Copperfield, said Mrs. Creakle, leading me to a sofa and sitting down beside me. I want to speak to you very particularly. I have something to tell you, my child. So Mrs. Creakle is being very nice to him, very gentle with him, and she has something to say. Mr. Creakle, at whom of course I looked, shook his head without looking at me. So he shook his head, but he didn't look at Davy, and stopped up a sigh with a very large piece of buttered toast. So we were just talking about this word sigh earlier today, and a sigh is but Mr. Creakle stopped up a sigh. He blocked his sigh, but he put something in his mouth to stop him from making that sad noise. A sigh. You are too young to know how the world changes every day, said Mrs. Creakle, and how the people in it pass away. Now, pass away is a gentle way of saying die. So you're too young to know how the world changes every day and how people die. But we all have to learn it, David. Some of us when we are young, and some of us when we're old, and some of us at all times in our lives. I looked at her earnestly. Let's put the word earnest up here. That's a pretty good word. Let's see, what number is that? That's number 4. So this is a word that we'll practice later. I mean, today I'm just reading the story, but then later I'll make a practice video where we practice using these vocabulary words. And I just want to check the definition of earnest. It means like, not enthusiastically, but maybe paying attention. Showing sincere or intense conviction. So showing a lot of interest, I would say, is how you could think of this word earnest. All right, so let's see. I looked at her earnestly. So maybe he's looking at her like this. Something like that. When you came away from home at the end of vacation, said Mrs. Creakle, after a pause, were they all well? After another pause, was your mama well? So when you left home, was your mother okay? Was she healthy? That's what she's asking. I trembled without distinctly knowing why. So trembling, that's kind of shaking, like. So he understands something is very wrong. I trembled without knowing why, and still looked at her earnestly. So earnestly, like with a lot of interest. Because she said, oh wait, making no attempt to answer. So he didn't try to answer this question. Because she said, I grieve to tell you that I hear this morning your mama is very ill. So to grieve something means to feel very bad about something, to feel very sad about something. So she's saying, I'm very sad to tell you that I hear this morning your mama is very ill. A mist rose between Mrs. Creakle and me, and her figure seemed to move in it for an instant. Now, mist is like fog, and I'm not sure how. Let me show you a picture of fog in case you don't know. It's funny because we just talked about this word this morning. I did another video, and the word mist came up. But let me just show you a picture. So this word is much more common than I realized because it seems to appear wherever I go. Mist. This is mist. It's like fog, but it's heavier. It's like a fog that you can feel. Now, how are they using it here? I'm not sure, because he says a mist rose between Mrs. Creakle and I. So there was like maybe there was a heavy air between them. You could feel the air between them. Maybe that's what it means. I'm not sure. A mist rose between Mrs. Creakle and me, and her figure seemed to move in it for an instant. Then I felt burning tears run down my face. So tears, that's what happens when you cry. I felt tears. I felt burning tears running down my face, and it was steady again. She is dangerously ill, she added. Wolf TK says, hi there. Hi there, Wolf TK. She is very dangerously ill, she added. I knew all now. She is dead. There was no need to tell me so. I had already broken out into a desolate cry and felt an orphan in the wide world. Okay, let's put the word break out. That's a phrasal verb, to break out. And, phrasal verbs, they can always mean many different things. So breakout has there are several different ways you can use breakout. But here, breakout means explode. So let's read that again. How does it work here? There was no need to tell me so. So she was dead. My mother was dead. I had already broken out into a desolate cry. So I exploded with crying. And felt an orphan in the wide world. This word desolate means abandoned. There's nobody here for you. So this was a lonely cry, a cry of loneliness, being alone in the world. Okay. She was very kind to me. She kept me there all day and left me alone sometimes, and I cried and wore myself to sleep, and awoke and cried again. When I could cry no more, I began to think. And then the oppression on my heavy breast, my heart, my heavy breast, this is the breast here. So the oppression on my heart, my breast, was heaviest. And my grief, a dull pain, there was no ease for. And yet my thoughts were idle. Idle. Let's put that word idle up here. I think I've already done this word, but it's worth doing again. So we can practice this word again too. To be idle means don't move. It should move. It's supposed to move, but it doesn't move. Or it can move, but it doesn't move. So what Davy says here is my thoughts were idle. He couldn't think about anything. His brain wasn't moving. The thoughts weren't moving. All he could think about was his mother. And yet my thoughts were idle, not intent on the calamity that weighed upon my heart, but idly loitering near it. I thought of our house shut up and hushed. Okay, this is a pretty complicated sentence. So my thoughts were idle. My thoughts weren't going anywhere. Not intent on the calamity. So his thoughts weren't focused on this horrible thing that happened, that his mother died, but idly loitering near it. So his thoughts were next to this horrible thing that happened. I don't know. It's kind of like like a depersonalization, like a detachment in modern, maybe that's how you could think of it. Like, somebody has a traumatic event and it's so traumatic that they kind of separate themselves from it. So they're sitting next to it instead of experiencing it. I think that's what he's describing. Because loiter means sitting around doing nothing. So his thoughts were sitting around next to this horrible thing that he had just heard, this horrible news that he had just heard. So I think that's the best way to explain it. I thought of our house shut up and hushed. Shut up here doesn't mean be quiet. It means closed. So they closed all the windows and all of the doors. That's what shut up means here. Nobody's walking around. Nobody's using the house. The house is closed. Now, the word hushed, though, does mean quiet. Hushed means no sound. So if somebody is making noise, you can tell them, this is rude, don't do it. But you could tell them, hush. That means shut up, don't talk. That's another way of saying shut up. I thought of the little baby who Mrs. Creakle said had been pining away for some time, and who they believed would die too. So when Davy went to go visit his mother in the last chapter, he discovered that he had a baby brother, a new baby brother. And so he's thinking of his little baby brother. And he said, I thought of my little baby brother. And Mrs. Creakle said he had been pining away. Pining away is like when you feel very sad and very strongly about something. Oh, I want it, I want it, I want it. So in this scenario, in this scene, the baby was obviously pining away for his mother. Oh, where's my mother? Where's my mother? It's just a little baby, so he wasn't making words, but crying. So I thought of the little baby who Mrs. Creakle had said had been pining away for some time, and who they believed would die too. So the baby maybe would die from sadness that his mother died. Well, this is a very sad chapter, isn't it? Okay, I thought of my father's grave in the churchyard by our house, and of my mother lying there beneath the tree I knew so well. It's funny because this morning we were practicing the word beneath, which means under the tree I knew so well. I stood upon the chair when I was left alone, and I looked into the glass to see how red my eyes were, and how sorrowful my face. I considered, after some hours were gone, if my tears were really hard to flow now, as they seem to be, what in connection with my loss? What? See, I don't understand. Let's read that again, because I don't understand it. I considered, after some hours were gone, if my tears were really hard to flow now, as they seem to be, what in connection with my loss it would affect the most to think of when I drew near home. For I was going home to the funeral. Wow, that's hard for me to understand. I have to read that again. I considered, after some hours were gone, if my tears were really hard to flow now, as they seem to be, what in connection with my loss it would affect me most to think of when I drew near home. Well, I really don't understand that too well, to be honest with you. But I would say he's just thinking about where will his thoughts be on his trip home, because now he must go home to the funeral. I'm sensible of having felt that a dignity attached to me among the rest of the boys, and that I was important in my affliction. I am sensible to having felt that a dignity attached to me among the rest of the boys, and that I was important in my affliction. So I think he's saying he knows now the other boys will treat him differently because they will also know the news, and they will treat him nicer. If ever a child were stricken with sincere grief, I was. So if ever there was a sad child, it was me. But I remember that this importance was a kind of satisfaction to me when I walked around the playground that afternoon while the boys were in school. So actually, yes, that's what he's saying. He's saying now the boys are treating him much nicer. They're being very kind to him in the playground because they heard the news. So they're being very kind to him. And maybe he's feeling a little bit guilty that he's enjoying that, even though he's very sad. Of course, he's very sad. When I saw them glancing at me out the windows as they went up to their classes, I felt distinguished. So he was outside by himself, but people were looking at him through the window because they were worried about him or concerned about him, and that made him feel special. And looked more melancholy and walked slower. So because of this special treatment, he found himself acting sadder, or showing more sadness because of the sympathy that he was getting. When school was over and they came out and spoke to me, I felt it rather good in myself not to be proud to any of them, and to take exactly the same notice of them all as before. But he tried not to act different in front of them when they came out to talk to him. I was to go home the next night, not by the mail, but by the heavy night coach, which was called the Farmer, and was principally used by country people traveling short intermediate distances upon the road. So he wasn't taking the normal way home. He was taking a special way home. Sounds like probably more expensive. I'm not sure. We had no storytelling that evening. Normally, Davy has become very popular with the boys when they're going to sleep because he began telling stories to them as they were going to sleep. And that became like a nightly thing where he would tell them stories until everybody fell asleep. But of course, not tonight. So he said, we had no storytelling that evening. I didn't tell any stories to the boys that night. And Traddles insisted on lending me his pillow. So one of the boys, Traddles, even felt so bad for Davy, he gave him his pillow. Oh, in case you don't know what a pillow is, I guess we better take a look at a picture. You probably do if you're watching something this advanced, but you never know. So it's a good idea to show what a pillow is. These are pillows. So Traddles gave him his pillow that night for extra comfort. Traddles insisted on lending me his pillow. I don't know what good he thought it would do for me, for I had one of my own, but it was all he had to lend, poor fellow, except a sheet of letter paper full of skeletons. Okay, in case you haven't seen the previous chapters, Traddles always has bad luck. The teacher is always beating him. He's always being abused by the teacher or by the owner of the school. And they beat him hard. And the way that he deals with that is he draws skeletons. So he's always being abused and beaten, and he draws skeletons on paper to deal with the pain. So Traddles offered him the pillow, and Davy says, I don't understand why he gave me the pillow. I already have a pillow. But that was all he had, besides papers full of skeletons that he draws when he's feeling bad. And that he gave me at parting a soother of my sorrows and a contribution to my peace of mind. Okay, let's talk about this word soothe. I think I've done this word before in another video, but that's okay. It's a word that comes up a lot, soothe. Soothe is a verb that means to make something feel calm. Something is excited, maybe excited because angry or excited because in pain. Soothe means make someone forget the pain, make someone feel better, make someone relax. So, let's see, how did he use it here? So he gave me at parting. Parting means leaving, going away. So when we were leaving, he gave me something to soothe my sorrows, to make me feel a little bit better, to make me feel a little bit calm because I was so sad, and a contribution to my peace of mind. So when Traddles offered the pillow, Davy didn't really need a pillow. But when he was going away, he could think about that event, Traddles giving him the pillow, thinking, oh, people care about me. There are people here who care about me. And that was a soother of his sorrows and a contribution to his peace of mind. Wolf TK said, I'm a really cool teacher, and he's glad that he found me. That's nice. Thank you. Well, I'm glad that you're watching. I'm glad that you like this, and I hope that you keep watching. Okay. So I left Salem House upon the morrow afternoon. So morrow, tomorrow, you could probably guess that, right? And Salem House is the name of the school. So I left the school the next day in the afternoon. I little thought that I left it, never to return. Okay, so now Davy's telling us, I didn't think about I was never returning. So so from this we can imagine that he's not returning. He's never returning to Salem House. So when he was leaving, he thought he would return one day, but that never happened. He didn't return. We traveled very slowly all night and did not get into Yarmouth before 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So we traveled all night, and we didn't arrive at Yarmouth until 9 o'clock in the morning. I looked out for Mr. Barkis. Mr. Barkis is the man. He owns a cart, and he always takes Davy from Yarmouth to his home. It's like a taxi. It's like an Uber from 180 years ago. And it's always the same man, Mr. Barkis. But he was not there. And instead of him, a fat, short-winded, merry-looking little old man in black, with rusty little bunches of ribbons at the knees of his breeches, black stockings, and a broad-brimmed hat, came puffing up to the coach window and said, Master Copperfield? Okay, well, I guess we have a lot of things to look at in this paragraph. Let's see. So I looked for Mr. Barkis. Mr. Barkis was his usual Uber driver. But he was not there. Instead of him, a fat, short-winded. Okay, now wind you probably know as, the air moving, okay? But you can use wind to talk about your breath. So somebody who is short-winded is somebody who breathes like that, because he's fat. He's short and fat, like me. And so he's probably always breathing like that. He never has enough wind. He never has enough breath. Merry looking. Merry is another word for happy. So he's a merry looking person. He's very happy looking. So he's short and fat. He has trouble breathing, but he looks happy. He's always very happy looking. Little old man in black with rusty little bunches of ribbons at the knees of his breeches. Okay, well, knee breeches, that's an old style of clothing. Let me just show you what knee breeches are. Not that you'll ever need to know, but since we're here and since we're talking about it, let's see what knee breeches are. So these are old, these are knee breeches. This is an older style of clothing. And you see where the pants finish at the knee, that's why they're called knee breeches. And you would have to tie them with ribbons or something. In this case, ribbons. So these are ribbons. Whoops. Wait a minute. Oh no, I've got too many windows open. Give me a minute. Okay, here are ribbons. Now, why he says they're rusty, I'm not sure. Let me show you what rusty means. Maybe there were some buttons or something, but this is what rust is. So he's saying rusty Rusty old ribbons, but I don't understand why he thinks ribbons can be rusty. I don't know. But this is rust. Like this is a rusty. This is rusty. I guess maybe old. Let's pretend that he means old. All right, let's see. So rusty little bunches of ribbons at the knees of his breeches, and black stockings, black socks, and a broad-brimmed hat, so a big hat, came puffing up to the coach window. And puffing, again, remember he's a short, fat man, and he's short-winded, which means he can't breathe very well. And puffing is when you take big amounts of air. This is puffing. So he came puffing up. So this man has a lot of health problems, I guess, but he's happy. He's merry looking. Okay, so he came puffing up to the window and he said, "Master Copperfield?" "Yes, sir." "Will you come with me, young sir, if you please?" he said, opening the door. "I shall have the pleasure of taking you home." So this is the man who will take him home. Now, I just have to take a little 1-minute break, and I will be right back. Okay, we're back. Now I'm huffing. That's huffing and puffing. Okay, let's keep going. I put my hand in his, wondering who he was, and we walked away to a shop in a narrow street, on which was written Omer, draper, tailor, haberdasher, funeral, furnisher, etc. It was a close and stifling little shop. Okay, let's put the word stifling up here. Stifling. What number is that? That's number 8. This is vocabulary word number 8 that we will practice later in a different video. Stifling. Okay, stifling means there's no air. Usually you use this word when you're talking about a small space and there's no air and you can't breathe. This is stifling. I wonder, well, I'm just going to Google the word stifling just to see what kind of pictures show up. And I'm just going to imagine small rooms or something. No, that's not what we get if we type Stifling. But we get things like this. Okay, so we get somebody looking like this. See, but there's no air. I'm stifling. It's kind of like suffocating almost. Stifling is a negative word. It means you're feeling claustrophobic, if you know that word. Like you're in a small space and you can't breathe. Imagine like a stifling relationship. That would be a relationship where it's very difficult because the other person is always there following you, with you. That's very stifling. You can't breathe. Actually, I wonder what the official definition is. Let's see. Stifling. Whoops. Since we're talking about it. They say very hot and causing difficulties in breathing. Making one feel constrained or oppressed. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of similar to what I was describing. So going into this room, going into this shop was not a comfortable place to be. It's small, it's hot, you can't breathe. It's stifling. It was a close and stifling little shop, full of all sorts of clothing, made and unmade, including one window full of beaver hats and bonnets. We went into a little back parlor behind the shop, where we found 3 young women at work on a quantity of black materials. So they went into the front of the shop, but then they took them into the back of the shop, and there were 3 women working on some clothes, making clothes, which were heaped upon a table. So a heap is like a pile of something. And little bits and cuttings of which were littered all over the floor. So there were little pieces from the cloth on the floor. There was a good fire in the room and a breathless smell of warm black crepe. I don't know what that word crepe is. Black crepe. Let's see. Black crepe. C-R-A-P. It's a plant. It's a type of plant. Let me just show you a picture. So I guess the room smelled like this plant. I don't know what that smells like. But that's how the room smelled, apparently, according to Davy. Whoops. Oh no, what happened? Let me bring that back. Oh. The smell of warm black crepe. I did not know what the smell was then, but I know now. The 3 young women, who appeared to be very industrious and comfortable. Industrious means hardworking. Actually, maybe we'll make that a word. Let's put that up here. Industrious. That's word number 9. So we'll practice this word in another video. Industrious. I mean, you think about the word industry. You know, in industry, you make things. You work and you make things. So you can use industrious to mean somebody is hardworking. Somebody is industrious. So these women who were in the back room making the clothes were very industrious. They were working hard. So the 3 young women, who appeared to be very industrious and comfortable, raised their heads and looked at me, and then went on with their work. Now, when you're sewing, this action of doing this is called stitching. So then it says stitch, stitch, stitch. They were working, making the black clothes. At the same time, there came from a workshop across a little yard outside the window a regular sound of hammering that kept a kind of tune. Okay, so the way that you make the sound of something hitting another thing regularly, like a hammer, is rat-a-tat-tat. Okay, so here we have rat-tat-tat, 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 tat, tat, without any variation. It had a rhythm like a song. Well, said my conductor. Conductor means driver. Well, said my conductor to one of the three young women. How do you get on, Minnie? Okay, that's a way of saying, how are you doing? What's happening? How is your work going? How do you get on, Minnie? We shall be ready by the trying on time. Okay, now trying on is a phrasal verb that you probably know. It's very common. That means putting clothes on to see if it fits. That's what try on means. It's a phrasal verb, and it means putting on clothes to see if it works, to see if it fits. So she says, we'll be ready by trying on time. So we'll be ready, but when the time comes to see if the clothes fit. Fit what? Fit who? I don't know. We shall be ready by trying on time, she replied gaily. Gay is a word that means happy. So when she said, we'll be ready by trying on time gaily, she was happy. She wasn't sad that somebody had died. She was happily doing her work. Don't you be afraid, Father. Don't worry. Don't worry, we'll be ready. That's what she's saying. We shall be ready by trying on time, she said gaily without looking up. Don't you be afraid, Father. Mr. Omer took off his broad-brimmed hat and sat down and panted. So we have all these different words. We have puffing and short-winded, and now panting. Panting, have you ever seen a dog? What a dog does when a dog is hot? That's panting. So, he's fat and very unhealthy, so he can't breathe very well. So he sat down panting. Mr. Omer took off his broad-brimmed hat and sat down and panted. He was so fat that he was obliged to pant some time before he could say, so, that's right. That's how he said it. Father, said Minnie playfully, what a porpoise you do grow. A porpoise? A porpoise is I don't understand what she means by this. A porpoise is like a dolphin. Here's a porpoise. But I don't understand, actually I don't understand what she means in this sentence. This is a porpoise. Maybe that's an old expression. Remember, this is 180 years old, this book. So, I guess it doesn't, oh, whoops, I keep closing that on accident. Wait, no, every time I look at a picture, I have to readjust. But one day I'll probably get used to this, and it won't be such a big problem anymore. But until then, sorry, you have to deal with it. Okay, let's see. So, Father, said Minnie playfully, what a porpoise you do grow. I have no idea what that means. Well, I don't know how it is, my dear, he replied, considering about it. I am rather so. I don't know what they're talking about here. You are such a comfortable man, you see, said Minnie. You take things so easy. No use taking 'em otherwise, said Dear. So the girl is saying, how can you be so relaxed? And the father is saying, well, why should I be any other way? Why should I worry? That's not going to help. That's not going to be good. No, indeed, returned the daughter. We are all pretty gay. So that means, yeah, you're right. You're right. That's the only way to be. We should just be happy. Here, thank heaven, ain't we, Father? We're all pretty gay here. Thank heaven, ain't we, Father? So we're all happy here. We have nothing to complain about. I hope so, my dear, said Mr. Omer, as I have got my breath now. I think I'll measure this young scholar. Would you walk him into the shop, Master Copperfield? So he's saying, now that I've got my breath, now that I can breathe again, I'll measure the boy. I'm going to measure the boy for his suit, his black suit. I proceeded, Mr. Omer, in compliance with his request, And after showing me a roll of cloth, which he said was extra super, and too good mourning for anything short of parents, he took my very dimensions. So mourning, that's when that's the period of time when you feel bad, when you feel the loss of something, like when somebody dies, you are in mourning. And Davy is going to the funeral of his mother, and the man, the fat man, is measuring him, but he's showing him the fabric, the cloth, and he's saying, this is really expensive, good cloth, and it's just the right kind of cloth if you're mourning a parent, if you're going to the funeral of your mother. So he took my various dimensions, he measured my body, and put them down in a book. He wrote them in a book. While he was recording them, he called my attention to his stock in trade, and to certain fashions which he said had just come up, and to certain other fashions which he said had just gone out. So that's very strange. It almost sounds like, I don't know yet, we'll continue reading in a minute, but to me it sounds like the man is trying to sell Davy more clothes besides the mourning clothes. Like Davy's thinking about buying a new suit when he's going to the funeral of his mother. And by that sort of thing, we very often lose a little mint of money, said Mr. Omer. But fashions are like human beings. They come in, nobody knows when, why, or how, and then they go out. Nobody knows when, why, or how. Everything is like life, in my opinion, if you look at it from this point of view. So he's complaining that he loses money when fashion changes, because he has to change everything in his shop. I don't know why he's telling Davy this, but he's saying life is like this. You never know when you're going to have to change things. Maybe that's his wise way of saying life is like that. You never know when change will happen. And sometimes it's very inconvenient. I was too sorrowful to discuss the question. I was too sad to talk about it with him, which would possibly have been beyond me under any circumstances. And Mr. Omer took me back into the parlor, breathing with some difficulty on the way. He must really be pretty fat. He then called me down a little breakneck range of steps behind the door. So he called Davy to go down some steps, but they were very small, and looks like maybe you could hurt yourself on those stairs. They were so strange and small. Bring up that tea and bread and butter. Oh, he called down. So not Davy, he didn't call Davy, but he called down a little set of steps behind a door. Bring up the tea and the bread and butter, which after some time, during which I sat, looking about me and thinking and listening to the stitching in the room, and the tune that was being hammered in the yard, appeared on a tray and turned out before me. I have been acquainted with you, said Mr. Omer, after watching me for some minutes, during which I had not made much impression on the breakfast, for the black things destroyed my appetite. I have been acquainted with you a long time, my friend. So we've talked about this word acquaint before, which means know a little. So the man is saying, I know your name. I have heard about you. I know something about you. Not that we're friends, but just that I know you somehow. I know your name, or I know some little piece of news about you. And Davy says, have you, sir? All your life, said Mr. Omer. I may say before it. I knew your father before you. He was 5'9" and half, and he lays in 20 foot of ground. Rat tat tat across the yard. That's the hammer in the background. He lays 25 foot of ground. So he's describing the size of his father's grave, because I guess Mr. Omer measured his body when he was being buried, when he died. He lays 25 foot of ground. If he lays in a fraction, said Mr. Omer pleasantly. It was either his request or his direction. I forget which. Do you know how my little brother is, sir? I inquired. Mr. Omer shook his head. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, that's the hammer in the background. He is in his mother's arms, said he. Oh, poor little fellow. Is he dead? Don't mind it more than you can help, said Mr. Omer. Yes, the baby's dead. So Mr. Omer is saying, don't think about it. Don't think about it. If it's possible, don't think about it. Yes, the baby is dead. My wounds broke out afresh at this intelligence. Intelligence can sometimes mean news. And that's what it means here. So suddenly he was, of course, he felt very bad when he learned his mother died at school. And he cried all day. But maybe he was feeling a little bit better on the trip to his home to see his mother's funeral. But he says, my wounds broke out afresh, meaning suddenly all that pain came back again at this news when he learned that his little brother was dead. I left the scarcely tasted breakfast. Let's put that word scarcely up. That's word number 10 that we will practice in a different video. Let's see, did I spell it correctly? Let me check. I have to check my spelling on this. Where's the scarcely tasted breakfast? Scarcely. Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. I'm really bad with spelling things. Okay. So I left the scarcely tasted breakfast. Scarcely means almost nothing, almost not. So when he says scarcely tasted breakfast, that means he only touched a little bit of the breakfast. He didn't have much breakfast. I left the scarcely tasted breakfast and went and rested on my head on another table in a corner of the little room, which Minnie hastily cleared, lest I should spot the morning that was lying there with my tears. Okay, so Davy goes to the table to cry, and Minnie, the worker, the girl, she takes away the cloth because she's afraid he's going to ruin it with his tears. Okay, so she was a pretty good-natured girl. So she was nice. She was a nice girl. But she was very cheerful, and having nearly finished her work, and being in good time, and was so different from me. Presently the tune left off, so no more hammering, no more rat-tat-tat. And a good-looking fellow came across the yard into the room. He had a hammer in his hand, and his mouth was full of little nails, which he was obliged to take out before he could speak. So he was hammering, taking the nails, hammering, taking the nails, and hammering, and then he came into the room and he took the nails so he could speak. Well, Joram, said Mr. Omer, how do you get on? So remember that question, how are you getting on? How do you get on means how is your work going? So the guy with the hammer says, all right, said Joram, done, sir. So he's finished with his job. He's finished with his hammering. Minnie colored a little, and the other two girls smiled at one another. What? You were at it by candlelight last night when I was at the club then? So you were at it. To be at it means like doing something. We're not sure what. Maybe it will be clear in the next few lines. But what? You were at it by candlelight? To me, that sounds like you were studying by candlelight. That's what I imagine he's talking about. but it could be almost anything with this phrase, at it. Could be used for other things like kissing or something like that. So maybe the young guy with the hammer was kissing his daughter Minnie by candlelight. I don't know yet. Let's see. You were at it by candlelight last night when I was at the club then? Were you? Said Mr. Omer, shutting the eye. Oh, I think Mr. Omer is surprised he's finished working already. And he says, you were at it by candlelight, meaning you were working by candlelight last night when I was away? Okay. Here I thought he was talking about kissing. Yes, said Joram. As you said, we could make a little trip of it and go over together if it was done. Minnie and me and you. So he's saying, yes, I finished early. I worked all night because you said if I finished, I could go with you on a little trip with Minnie. So maybe they were at it. Oh, I thought you were going to leave me out altogether, said Mr. Omer, laughing till he coughed. So again, I think maybe this young man likes his daughter because he's saying, yes, you said that me and you and Minnie could go on a trip together. And the father jokes and says, oh, you mean you're going to include me? And then he started laughing until he started coughing. As you was so good as to say that, resumed the young man, why I turned to with a will, you see. Will you give me your opinion of it? Wow, okay, let's see. I don't understand this sentence, actually. As you was so good to say that, resumed the young man. So, like, you were so nice to invite me on this little trip. Why I turned to with a will, you see. I don't understand that. I don't know what he's saying there. Why I turned to with a will. No, I don't get that. Will you give me your opinion of it? I will, said Mr. Omer, rising. My dear. And he stopped and turned to me. Would you like to see your... No, father. Minnie interrupted. I thought it might be agreeable, my dear, said Mr. Omer, but perhaps you're right. So I think he's saying, would you like to see your mother's dead body? I can't say how I knew it was my dear mother's coffin. Okay, just in case you don't know what a coffin is, let me show you. So not the body, but the coffin. Let me just show you this picture. This is a coffin. So I think the man is making the clothes for the... Oh, that boy, the boy who was hammering, he was making the coffin. And now the man is saying, do you want to see it? And the daughter says, no, don't do that. Don't show it to him. Oh, gosh. Okay. Let's see. I can't say how I knew it was my dear, dear mother's coffin that they went to look at. I had never heard one making. I had never seen one that I know of, but it came into my mind with what the noise was, while it was going on. And when the young man entered, I'm sure I knew what he had been doing. So that noise, that hammer in the back in the yard, was that boy making the coffin for his mother. The work being now finished, the two girls, whose names I had not heard, so he knows Minnie, but there are two other girls working, and he didn't hear their names, brushed the shreds and the threads from their dresses, and went into the shop to put that to rights, and to wait for customers. Minnie stayed behind to fold up what they had made and pack it into two baskets. So they're just finishing up all of the work. they made the clothes and the coffin is ready, and now the girls are going to back to work to do something different. This she said upon her knees, humming a lively tune. Humming is so Minnie's a very happy person, even though this is a very sad kind of job. So she's talking and she's humming a song, while Joram, who I had no doubt was her lover, came in and stole a kiss from her while she was busy. So to steal a kiss, that's that's stealing a kiss. He didn't appear to while she was busy. He didn't appear to mind at all, and said oh, wait a minute. Let me see this again. Came in and stole a kiss from her while she was busy. He didn't appear to mind me at all. So he didn't care. He didn't care that I was there. It didn't bother him that I saw him kiss her. And said her father was gone for the chase, and he must make haste to get himself ready. Oh, not chase, chaise, which means chair. That's a French word for chair, for the chaise. So maybe a particular type of carriage for funerals. I'm not sure why it says chaise here, which means chair, but some kind of chair. And he must make haste to get himself ready. He must hurry to get ready. Then he went out again, and then he put her thimble and scissors in her pocket, and stuck a needle threaded with black thread neatly into the bosom of her gown. This is the bosom area. So she stuck the needle here into the bosom of her gown, of her dress, and put on her outer clothing smartly, at a little glass behind the door, in which I saw the reflection of her pleased face. All this I observed, sitting at the table in the corner, with my head leaning on my hand, and my thoughts running on very different things. The chaise soon came round to the front of the shop. So it's like a carriage or something. And the baskets being put in first, I was put in next. And those three followed. So all of the people are going into the carriage to go on the trip, to travel to Davy's home. I remember it as a kind of half chaise cart. I'm just going to see. I want to picture what this is. They don't exist anymore because we don't travel that way anymore. But let me put the word horse. Cart. Okay, so this is a chaise cart. The type of carriage that they would use back then. So the chaise soon came round to the front of the shop, and the baskets being put in first, and I was put in next. I entered next, and those three followed. I remember it as a kind of half chaise cart. So this was like the picture we just saw, but maybe there was an area in the back where you could put things. Half pianoforte van, painted of a somber color. Somber means serious. So the carriage was a serious color, like black, and drawn by a black horse. So a black horse pulled the carriage with a long tail. There was plenty of room for us all. I do not think I have ever experienced so strange a feeling in my life. I am wiser now, perhaps, as that of being with them, remembering how they had been employed, and seeing them enjoy the ride. I was not angry with them, because it's weird. You know, they're all very happy, and this poor little boy is going to see his dead mother, and they're the people who made all of the things for the event, the funeral. And they didn't seem to mind. They were all very happy and joking and having fun. The old man sat in front to drive, and the two young people sat behind him. And whenever he spoke to them, leaned forward to one on one side of his chubby face. Chubby means fat. And the other on the other, and made a great deal of him. They would have talked to me too, but I held back. Well, let's put that. That's a phrasal verb, to hold back. Let's see. That's number 11. So again, I'll make a video where we actually practice. Oh, hold again. Wait a minute. Let me fix this. Hold back. I will make a video with exercises where we practice these words, and that way it would be easy to remember them. These are useful words that we use all the time. And hold back means like hesitate. Don't let something out. So Davy says, I would have talked to them, but I held back. I hesitated. I didn't let out what I wanted to say. I didn't feel like talking, maybe, is a way to think of that. They would have talked to me too, but I held back and moped. Okay, mope is when you're feeling bad. You know, when you're feeling bad and you have a frown on your face and you just sit there, you don't want to talk to anyone, you just want to feel bad. That's moping. But usually moping is bad, but in this case it's understandable because he's going to his mother's funeral. But I held back and moped in my corner, and scared by their lovemaking and hilarity. Though it was far from boisterous, we've had that word boisterous before. Boisterous means loud, exciting. So they were in a good mood and they were talking, but they weren't boisterous. They weren't very loud. They were a little bit respectful. And almost wondering that no judgment came upon them for their hardness of heart. So he's wondering, he's maybe asking himself, why am I not angry with them for being happy? They shouldn't be happy. That's kind of what he's wondering. Why am I not? I should be angrier. I should be a little bit angrier about this situation. Okay. So when they stopped to bait the horse and ate and drank and enjoyed themselves, I could touch nothing that they touched. But I kept my fast unbroken. To fast means not to eat. So he said, when they stopped to eat, I didn't eat. I continued to fast. I continued to refuse to eat. So when we reached home, I dropped out of the chaise behind as quickly as possible, that I might not be in their company before those solemn windows, looking blindly on me like closed eyes once bright. So when they arrived to his house, he got out of the carriage very quickly because he wanted to be alone in that moment when he stood and looked at the house where his mother had died and where he grew up. And he just wanted to have that experience by himself and not be bothered by these other people who were with him. And oh, how little need I had to think of what would move me to tears when I came back, seeing the window of my mother's room, and next to it, that which in the better time was mine. So he's beginning to feel so much sadness looking at the window of his mother's room, and looking at the window of his old room. It's not his room anymore because he had to leave home. I was in Peggotty's arms before I got to the door. So Peggotty is the servant of the house, but she's like Davy's grandmother. So they love each other very much. And as soon as Peggotty saw him arrive, she came out and she took him. I was in Peggotty's arms before I got to the door, and she took me into the house. Her grief burst out when she first saw me. Grief is feeling sad, very, very strong sad. And remember, we've already talked about this word break out, which means explode. That was word number 3, or word number 5. So her grief broke out. So maybe she was doing the work of the house and she was pretending not to be sad, but she was keeping all of that inside of her. But when she saw Davy, it exploded. And probably she started crying or something like that. Her grief burst out. It didn't break out, it burst out. Burst is another word for explode. Okay, her grief burst out when she first saw me, but she controlled it soon. And she spoke in whispers, whispers. And she walked softly, as if the dead could be disturbed. So think about that. Why does she have to hide her sadness? And that's because of Davy's stepfather and his evil sister. So she has to not show any emotion. She wants to, and she did for a minute when she first saw Davy, but then she stopped it again. She had to, because if she showed feeling in front of them, who knows what would happen. She had not been in bed. I found her for a long time. She sat up at night, still, and watched as long as her poor dear Pretty was above the ground. She said she would never desert her. To desert someone means to leave someone, to abandon them. And she promised in an earlier chapter, I think chapter 8, she promised, I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you. And now she's keeping her promise, because the dead body of the mother is sitting in the house so people can come and see it before they bury her. And Peggotty won't go to bed. She just sits by the coffin and refuses to leave, because a long time ago, no, not a long time ago, a few months ago, she promised, I will never leave you. I will never desert you. Desert means abandon or leave. Miss Murdstone took no heed of me. That's his stepfather's evil sister. And what that means, Mr. Murdstone, sorry, Mr. Murdstone took no heed of me. That's his stepfather. And what that means is he ignored him. He didn't say hello, he didn't pay attention to him, he just ignored him. Mr. Murdstone took no heed of me when I went into the parlor where he was. So he ignored me when I walked into the room. But he sat by the fireside, weeping silently. So he was crying. And pondering his elbow chair. So I think elbow chair, maybe that means armchair. So he was looking at his armchair, pondering his armchair. He was pondering in his armchair. Sorry. So he was in his armchair thinking. Miss Murdstone, that's the evil sister. Miss Murdstone, who was busy at her writing desk, which was covered with letters and papers, gave me her cold fingernails and asked me in an iron whisper if I had been measured for my mourning. So she didn't give him her hand. She didn't hold his hand. She just gave the fingernails. She didn't want to touch him. And she asked him, did you get your clothes for the funeral? But in a very unfriendly, unkind way, unfeeling way. I said yes. And your shirts, said Miss Murdstone. Have you brought them home? Have you brought your shirts home? Yes, ma'am. I have brought all of my clothes. This was all the consolation that her firmness administered to me. So that was as nice as she could be to me. I do not doubt that she had a choice pleasure in exhibiting what she called self-command, and her firmness and her strength of mind and her common sense and the whole diabolical catalogue of her unamiable qualities on such an occasion. So he's saying he thinks that she enjoyed being cold and mean to him at the time of his mother's funeral, because that's the kind of person she takes satisfaction in abusing people. So he could see that she was enjoying acting like this way towards him. She was particularly proud of her turn for business, and she showed it now in reducing everything to pen and ink and being moved by nothing. It sounds like she was enjoying the process of writing letters to people, telling them that his mother had died. Not that she enjoyed that his mother had died, but she enjoys that kind of work, I guess, of writing and what do you call that? I forget the word for that. She enjoys paperwork. She enjoys that sort of thing. I think that's what he said. I don't know. Okay. So let's see. All the rest of the day, and from the morning to night afterwards, she sat at the desk, scratching composedly with a hard pen, writing, speaking in the same imperturbable whisper to everybody. So she was talking like this, never relaxing a muscle in her face or softening the tone of her voice. But it didn't have feeling. It wasn't a nice whisper. It was just a whisper. Or appearing with an atom of her dress astray. So she looked perfect. Her dress was perfect. Everything about her was perfect. Her brother, that's Davy's stepfather, took a book sometimes, but never read it that I saw. So he was holding a book, but he wasn't really reading it. He would open it and look at it as if he were reading it, but would remain for a whole hour without turning a leaf, without turning the page. And then put it down and walk to and fro. You know, I think that they used that earlier, and I think that's actually a pretty useful thing, to and fro. So let's make that number 12 of vocabulary that we will practice in a later video. To and fro, that means walking this way and then going this way and then going this way, never changing, just going from this way to this way, this way to this way. So he was walking to and fro. He would walk to one end of the room and then return to the other end of the room and then repeat that action many times. That's walking to and fro. Let's see. So what did he say? So he would put the book down and then walk to and fro in the room. I used to sit with folded hands watching him and counting his footsteps hour after hour. He very seldom spoke to her, so he didn't talk to his sister, and never to me. He never said a word to Davy. He seemed to be the only restless thing, except the clocks, in the whole motionless room. Restless means has to move, has a lot of energy. So he seemed to be the only restless thing. He seemed to be the only thing in the room with energy because he was walking to and fro, except for the clocks. The clocks were also moving. Tick, 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 tick. In these days before the funeral, I saw but little of Peggotty, except that in passing up and down the stairs. So Peggotty, the maid, and Davy have a very, very close relationship. But his stepfather doesn't like that. Neither does his sister. So they don't permit them to talk. So they try to see each other, but they can't really see each other. They're not allowed to talk to each other. So in these days before the funeral, I saw very little of Peggotty, except in passing up or down the stairs, because he's not allowed to talk to her. I always found her close to the room where my mother and her baby lay. And except that she came to me every night and sat by my bed's head while I went to sleep. A day or two before the burial, I think it was a day or two before, but I am conscious of confusion in my mind. and about that heavy time, with nothing to mark its progress. So he's saying, oh, it was a day or two before the funeral, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I can't, it's hard to remember because that was a difficult time. She took me into the room. I only recollect that underneath some white covering on the bed, with a beautiful cleanliness and freshness all around it, there seemed to me to lie embodied the solemn stillness that was in the house, and that when she would have turned the cover gently back. See, so Peggotty is taking Davy into the room where his dead mother is, and she's covered with a sheet, and Peggotty is about to remove the sheet so that Davy can see his dead mother. And he cried, "Oh, no, no, no," and held her hand. So he stopped her from showing the face of his mother. He couldn't look at it. If the funeral had been yesterday, I could not recollect. I could not recollect it better. So he's saying in modern English, that means I remember it like it was yesterday. That's how you would say that now. The very air of the best parlor, when I went in at the door, the bright condition of the fire, the shining of the wine in the decanters, the patterns of the glasses and plates, the faint, sweet smell of cake, the odor of Miss Murdstone's dress, and our black clothes. Mr. Chillip is in the room and comes to speak to me. "And how is Master Davy?" he said kindly. "I cannot tell him very well." I give him my hand, which he holds in his. "Dear me," says Mr. Chillip meekly, smiling. Meekly means like shy. So he says, "Dear me," and then he meekly smiles. I don't know if I can do a meek smile. Like that. Maybe as a meek smile. Meek means like shy or weak. "Dear me." Like kind of like that. I don't know. That's my meek smile. I don't know how good that is, but that's... So, "Dear me," says Mr. Chillip, meekly smiling, with something of shining in his eye. "Our little friends grow up around us. They grow up out of our knowledge, ma'am." This is to Miss Murdstone, who makes no reply. So he's talking to Miss Murdstone, but she doesn't answer him. "There's a great improvement here, ma'am," says Mr. Chillip. I forget who Mr. Chillip is in this story. Miss Murdstone merely answers with a frown and a formal bend. Mr. Chillip, discomfited, goes into a corner, keeping me with him, and opens his mouth no more. So he's trying to talk to Davy's stepfather's evil sister, but she doesn't talk to him. And he feels very uncomfortable being around her. And so he takes Davy and moves him away from the evil sister. I remark this because I remark everything that happens, not because I care about it myself, or have done since I came home. And now the bell begins to sound, and Mr. Omer and another come to make us ready. So they ring a bell, and that's a signal that it's time to take the mother from the home and bring her to the cemetery, I guess. As Peggotty was wont to tell me long ago, the followers of my father to the same grave were made ready in the same room. I think what he's saying here, it's a little bit complicated, but I think what he's saying here is, as they told him before, that was the same room where his father was before they took him to the cemetery, and now the same thing is happening to his mother. She was in the same room, and now they will take her to the same cemetery. There are Mr. Murdstone, our neighbor, Mr. Graper, Mr. Chillip, and I. When we go out to the door, the bearers, The bearers are the people who will carry the body. And their load are in the garden, and they move before us down the path. So they're carrying the mother down the path to the cemetery. And past the elms, and through the gate, and into the churchyard, where I have so often heard the birds sing on a summer morning. We stand around the grave. The day seems different to me from every other day, and the light not of the same color, of a sadder color, so everything looks sad to him on this day. And now there is a solemn hush. Remember, hush means quiet, and solemn, we've talked about these words a little bit earlier. Solemn means serious. Now there's a serious quiet. Now there's a solemn hush, which we have brought from home with what is resting in the mold. Okay, so now he's saying, now there's a solemn hush. There's a very serious quiet in the churchyard where the mother is being put. And he's saying, we brought this with us. We brought this silence, this serious quiet with us to the church from home with the mother. So as we carried her, that serious feeling in the air was also there. Now, let's read it again. Now there is a solemn hush, which we have brought from home with what is resting in the mold. Mold is like a case where you put something. And while we stand bareheaded, so while we stand with no hats, nothing covering our heads, I hear the voice of the clergyman, so that's like a priest, sounding remote in the open air, and yet distant and plain saying. So Davy is saying, I can hear the priest, the clergyman talking, but he sounds very far away. The whole thing sounds very far away. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. And then I hear sobs. Sobs are crying. So suddenly he hears crying. People are crying. And standing apart among the lookers-on are people who are watching, maybe strangers. So they're having the funeral, they're having the service at the cemetery, and there are onlookers or lookers-on. So there are people outside of the group watching, seeing what's happening. I see that good and faithful servant, whom all the people upon earth I love best, and unto whom my childish heart is certain that the Lord will one day say, well done. So he's talking about Peggotty, the servant of the house, who he loves. And he's saying, definitely, Peggotty will go to heaven. Definitely, God is proud of Peggotty. God loves her. There are many faces that I know among the little crowd, the faces that I knew in church. So these are the onlookers. When mine was always wondering there. When mine was... Wait, let me read that again. There are many faces that I know among the little crowd. Faces that I knew in church. So he recognizes faces from church. Maybe he doesn't know these people, but he knows their faces. When mine was always wondering there. Faces that first saw my mother when she came to the village in her youthful bloom. So these people remember when she first married Davy's father and first saw her there in the church. I do not mind them. I mind nothing but my grief. So this mind, maybe when you probably know that phrase, I don't mind, which means like I don't care. But he's not saying I don't care about them. He's saying I'm not paying attention to them. I'm not focusing on them. That's what it means here. I do not mind them. I'm not thinking about them. They're watching. I don't care. I mind nothing but my grief. I'm only thinking about my grief. That's the only thing I'm focused on. And yet I see and know them all. And even in the background, far away, I see Minnie looking on, and her eye glancing on her sweetheart. So she's looking at the boy who made the coffin, who is near. It's over, and the earth is filled in, and we turn to come away, and before us stands our house, so pretty and unchanged, so linked in my mind with the young idea of what is gone. To all my sorrow has been nothing to the sorrow it calls forth. So he's looking at his house, and he's feeling this very deep sadness, and it's even stronger than all of the sadness he felt this past week when he learned his mother died and then his brother died and going to the funeral. This is a very strong feeling of sadness that he has as he looks at this house where he grew up. But they take me on, and Mr. Chillip talks to me, and when we get home, puts some water to my lips. And when I ask his leave to go up to my room, dismisses me with the gentleness of a woman. So at some point, Davy wants to be alone. So he asks Mr. Chillip, "Is it okay if can I go to my room now, please?" And Mr. Chillip says, "Okay," in a very understanding way. All this, I say, is yesterday's event. Events of later date have floated from me to the shore where all forgotten things will reappear, but this stands like a high rock in the ocean. So he's saying, I remember this just like it was yesterday. There are other things that happened in my life, I can't remember them, but this thing, I remember every detail of it. I knew that Peggotty would come to me in my room. The Sabbath stillness of the time. The day was so like Sunday. I have forgotten that. So the Sabbath means Sunday in this case. And maybe this wasn't a Sunday, but it felt like a Sunday. It was very quiet. Everybody was dressed in black. It felt like a Sunday. Let me read that again from the beginning. I knew that Peggotty would come to me in my room, the Sabbath stillness of the time. So it felt like a quiet, still Sunday. The day was so like Sunday, so the day was very similar to Sunday. I have forgotten that. So the Sabbath stillness of the time was suited to us both. So we both not enjoyed. This was not a thing of enjoying, but this stillness, this quietness, this Sunday-like feeling was something they both were comfortable with. She sat down by my side upon my little bed, and holding my hand, and sometimes putting it to her lips, and sometimes smoothing it with hers, as she might have comforted my little brother, told me in her way all that she had to tell concerning what had happened. "She was never well," said Peggotty. "For a long time she was uncertain in her mind and not happy. When her baby was born, I thought at first she would get better, but she was more delicate and sunk a little every day, and she used to like to sit alone before her baby came, and then she cried. But afterwards she used to sing to it, so soft, that I once thought, when I heard her, it was like a voice up in the air that was rising away." So the mother was always sad after she got married to Mr. Murdstone. And Peggotty thought having the baby would make her happier, but it didn't. It seemed to make her worse. I think she got to be more timid. So I think she got to be more shy and more frightened, like of late. So recently she was becoming more shy and more scared. And that a hard word was like a blow to her. So you had to be very careful when you talked to her. You couldn't say anything that could sound not nice or unkind, because if you said unkind words to her, maybe she would cry. She was very sensitive for some reason. But she was always the same to me. She never changed to her foolish Peggotty. Didn't my sweet girl. Okay, so Peggotty is saying, but I always remember her as the sweet young girl that she was when I first met her. The last time I saw her like her old self was the night when you came home, my dear. So that night when he came home from the holidays, Peggotty said that was the last time I saw her normal. The day you went away, she said to me, I shall never see my pretty darling again. Something tells me so. That tells me the truth, I know. So the day Davy left for school, again, when he left after the holidays, his mother said to Peggotty, I'll never see him again, I know it. She tried to hold up after that. So that means she tried to be strong after that. And many a time when they told her she was thoughtless and light-hearted, made believe to be so. So the Murdstones, her husband, Davy's stepfather, and the mean sister were always telling the mother, you're no good, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. And this was killing her. She never told her husband what she had told me. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I missed. So I'm going to start from the beginning of the paragraph. She tried to hold up after that. She tried to be strong. And many a time when they told her she was thoughtless, that means stupid, and light-hearted, like she can't take things seriously, made believe to be so, she started to believe it. But it was all a bygone then. So it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter by now. She never told her husband what she had told me. She was afraid of saying it to anybody else, till one night, a little more than a week before it happened, when she said to him, my dear, I think I'm dying. It's off my mind now, Peggotty, she told me, when I laid her bed that night. He will believe it more and more, poor fellow, every day for a few days to come, and then it will be past. I'm very tired. If this is sleep, sit by me a while. Sit by me while I sleep. Don't leave me. God bless both my children. God protect and keep my fatherless boy. I never left her afterwards, said Peggotty. She often talked to them two downstairs, for she loved them. She couldn't bear not to love anyone who was about her. But when they went away from her bedside, she always turned to me, as if there was rest where Peggotty was, and never fell asleep any other way. So the mother realized she was dying, and she told Peggotty, I'm dying. And once Peggotty realized that was true, she never left her side. She always stayed with her. And the only way that she could fall asleep was in Peggotty's arms. And Peggotty stayed with her the entire time. On the last night, in the evening, she kissed me and said, if my baby should die too, Peggotty, please let them lay him in my arms, bury us together. It was done, for the poor lamb lived but a day beyond her. Let my dearest boy go with us to our resting place, she said, and tell him that his mother, when she lay here, blessed him not once, but 1,000 times. Another silence followed this, and another gentle beating on my hand. It was pretty far in the night," said Peggotty, when she asked me for some drink, and when she had taken it, gave me such a patient smile. The dear, so beautiful. So Peggotty is talking about the moment when his mother finally died. It was pretty far in the night, so maybe it was 12 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock. When she asked me for some drink, and when she had taken it, gave me a patient smile. So maybe that's a smile like, I don't know, I can't do it. I don't know how to do a patient smile. Daybreak had come, and when the sun was rising, when she said to me, "How kind and considerate Mr. Copperfield," that's her husband, her first husband, Davy's father, "had always been to her, and how he had borne with her, and told her, when she doubted herself, that a loving heart was better and stronger than wisdom." So he's saying she loved Davy's father very much. And let's see. And how he had always been to her, and how he had borne with her. What that means, how he had borne with her, is how he tolerated her mistakes, or he tolerated her stupidity. And told her when she doubted herself, when she would say, "Oh, I'm so stupid," that a loving heart was better and stronger than being smart. And that he was a happy man in hers. So he was very the first husband, Mr. Copperfield, never called her stupid. He was always very happy with her and encouraged her and made her feel good. The second husband, Mr. Murdstone, was mean to her and always said that she was stupid. And so did his mean sister, his evil sister. And that was the thing probably that was killing her, was Mr. Murdstone, her second husband, and his abuse. "Peggotty, my dear," she said, "put me nearer to you," for she was very weak. So she said, "Peggotty, bring me near you." So Peggotty brought her near. "Lay your good arm underneath my neck," she said, "and turn me to you. So let me see your face. Because she's very weak, she can't move. For your face is going far off, and I want it to be near." So she's saying, let me see your face. Bring your face close to my face, because you're moving far away. It's hard to see you, because she's dying. I put it as she asked, so I did it. I brought her face close to mine. And oh, Davy, the time had come when my first parting words to you were true. When she was glad to lay her poor head on her stupid cross old Peggotty's arm. So remember, Peggotty sometimes would be rude to the mother, because Peggotty would say, "No, you have to be smarter. You have to do this." And sometimes the mother would get angry with Peggotty. And so cross means angry. Stupid, cross old Peggotty. So, oh gosh, this is sad. Okay, so when she was glad to lay her poor head in her stupid, cross old Peggotty's arms, and she died like a child that had gone to sleep. Thus ended Peggotty's narration, and from the moment of my knowing the death of my mother, the idea of her, as she had been of late, had vanished from me. I remembered her from that instant only as the young mother of my earliest impressions, who had been used to wind her bright curls. So to wind is this. So when Davy was a little boy, she used to make Davy fix her hair, wind her curls around her finger. And to, oh no, just to, he used to just do this with her hair. Okay. And to dance with me at twilight in the parlor. When Peggotty had told me now was so far from bringing me back to the later period that it rooted the earlier image in my mind. It may be curious, but it's true. In her death, she winged her way back to her calm, untroubled youth and canceled all the rest. So Peggotty told Davy this whole story about what happened and how she died and her last words. But that actually didn't, to Davy's surprise, that actually didn't make him sad. It reminded him of who she used to be before she married Mr. Murdstone and became this depressed, sorry woman who died of a broken heart. The mother who lay in the grave was the mother of my infancy. The little creature in her arms was myself, as I had once been, hushed forever on her bosom. Remember, hush means quiet, and bosom is this area of the body. So forever quiet here. Oh, wow. Okay, well, that was the end of chapter 9 of David Copperfield. So I will take the vocabulary words that we have talked about and learned in this chapter. There are 12 of them. And I will make a video practicing those words so that you don't forget them. All right, well, thank you everybody for watching Chapter 9 of David Copperfield, and I will see you next time with Chapter 10 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.